Many legendary actors once defined the golden age of Hollywood, shaping the dreams of an entire generation. But behind the elegance and prestige, some carried shadows that terrified everyone who worked with them. In today's story, we revisit the forgotten truth about stars whose presence behind the scenes created fear, tension, and silence. These were icons adored by millions, yet capable of behavior so volatile that directors, co-stars, and entire crews lived in constant dread. Their fame made them powerful. Their rage made them dangerous. And tonight, we reveal the hidden reality Hollywood spent decades trying to bury.
Bette Davis. Everything shifted on the set of The Little Foxes in 1941, when Bette Davis unleashed one of her most infamous tirades after a camera operator hesitated during a crucial close-up. Witnesses said the room froze instantly. Davis, known for her piercing eyes and unstoppable intensity, tore into the crew with such fury that even veteran technicians stepped back. From that moment on, people learned to anticipate the storm, the sharp tone, the sudden silence, the feeling that one wrong move could ignite another explosion. Working with her was an honor, but also a calculated risk. Bette Davis was one of Hollywood's most powerful actresses, with 2 Oscars, dozens of classics, and a career built on unmatched discipline. But behind the scenes, her relentless pursuit of perfection often slipped into intimidation. Directors feared her confrontations, co-stars dreaded her criticism, and assistants avoided delivering bad news. Her personal life mirrored this turbulence. Failed marriages, bitter custody battles, and strained relationships with her children intensified the emotional pressure she carried everywhere. Despite her brilliance, by the time Davis died in 1989, she left behind a legacy divided between admiration and unease, proof that even greatness can cast a frightening shadow.
Errol Flynn. Fear began to spread on the set of The Adventures of Don Juan in 1948, when Errol Flynn walked in drunk, threw his prop sword on the ground, and screamed about a costume detail that didn't go his way. The extras stood still, the technical crew looked at each other in silence, and the director knew that one wrong reaction could ruin the entire day. For Flynn, the on-screen charm was just a mask. Behind it lay impulsiveness, alcoholism, and an uncontrollable temper. Errol Flynn, Hollywood's adventure icon who captivated audiences with his handsome looks and free-spirited demeanor, was a terror behind the scenes. Barb roles, scandalous accusations, tangled love affairs, and violent temper tantrums made any film crew wary. Many of his co-stars admit that they never knew which version of Flynn would be here today. When he died of a heart attack in 1959 at the age of 50, Flynn's legacy was overshadowed by the chaos of his own life, a figure so famous and dangerous that Hollywood both admired and feared him.
James Cagney. Many people on the set of 1931's The Public Enemy said they would never forget the moment when James Cagney became so angry that he threw a prop to the floor, shaking the entire set. Just because an extra stepped a few centimeters out of position, Cagney completely lost control, rushing forward to yell with what people described as sharp as a knife. From that day on, the entire crew watched their every move, fearing that the slightest misstep might ignite another fury. James Cagney, classic Hollywood's greatest gangster star, was known for his fierce demeanor and explosive energy on screen, but behind the camera, that tension sometimes became a real threat. He was a perfectionist, prone to explosive tempers and hated incompetence, to the point of taking jobs from others if they didn't meet expectations. Family relations were also fraught. Conflict, years of estrangement, and lingering emotional trauma. When Cagney died in 1986, Hollywood remembered him as a genius. But those who worked with him still remember a man who was both brilliant and terrifying.
Joan Crawford. The tension became unbearable during the filming of Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte in 1964, when crew members whispered that Joan Crawford's presence felt like a storm waiting to break. Sick or not, she arrived on set determined to dominate every frame, and when she felt threatened or challenged, her temper shifted the entire atmosphere. Assistants avoided her eye contact, props teams hid mistakes, and directors prayed she wouldn't erupt. What looked like professional discipline to the public was, for many working behind the scenes, genuine fear. Joan Crawford, one of Hollywood's greatest icons, built her career on fierce ambition, dramatic talent, and an unshakable image of perfection. But privately, she carried deep insecurities, mood swings, and a ruthless drive that pushed co-stars and crew to the edge. Her marriages collapsed under emotional strain, her children feared her strict control, and rumors of violent outbursts followed her long after Mommy Dearest resurfaced her darkest legacy. By the end of her life in 1977, Crawford had withdrawn from Hollywood, living in isolation as her carefully constructed image crumbled. Her death marked the end of a legend, one both admired and secretly dreaded.
Kirk Douglas. Tension was always present on the set of Spartacus in 1960, but the moment that made the whole crew freeze was when Kirk Douglas shouted directly at a technician because the light was a few degrees off. No one dared to respond. Douglas approached, pointed, his voice so sharp that the whole set fell into absolute silence. From that day on, every member of the crew understood that they were working with a man who could switch from professionalism to anger in a split second. Kirk Douglas, an icon of Hollywood's golden age, was admired for his strength, ambition, and steely spirit. But behind the scenes, there was a different side to him, tough to the point of cruelty, sometimes violent, and always wanting absolute control. Many co-stars said they were more nervous working with him than on any other project. His personal relationships were also filled with conflict, betrayal, and constant confrontation. Douglas lived until 2020 at the age of 103, but those terrifying behind-the-scenes stories are still recalled by those who worked with him as part of the dark side of an immortal legend.
Marlon Brando. The breaking point came during the chaotic production of Mutiny on the Bounty in 1962, when Marlon Brando's unpredictable behavior pushed the crew into open fear. Scenes that should have taken hours stretched into days because Brando refused to follow direction, rewrote dialogue on the spot, or abruptly walked off set without warning. Technicians whispered that any small mistake, a misplaced prop, a light set too bright, could trigger one of his infamous eruptions. Even seasoned producers admitted they had never encountered a force as intimidating as Brando at his most volatile. Marlon Brando, the revolutionary actor who transformed modern acting, also carried a darkness few dared confront. His genius brought him acclaim, but his disdain for authority, sudden mood swings, and raw emotional intensity made him nearly impossible to manage. Co-stars described filming with him as walking into a lion's cage, never knowing whether they would face brilliance or fury. Relationships deteriorated, affairs blurred into conflict, and family tragedies, especially the turmoil surrounding his children, deepened the instability that followed him throughout his career. By the time he died, in 2004, Brando was both a legend and a cautionary tale, a man whose power on set left unforgettable performances and unforgettable fear.
Montgomery Clift. The fear began to grip the set of Raintree County in 1957, shortly after a horrific car accident left Montgomery Clift disfigured. When Clift returned to the set, he appeared to be in a state of constant pain that no one knew how to deal with. Just a reminder of reshoots could cause him to throw a script to the ground or lock himself in the dressing room for hours. Film crew members said working with Clift at that time was like walking under a collapsing roof. The slightest impact could cause his entire emotional arc to collapse. Montgomery Clift, the handsome, elegant, and emotional Hollywood star, was completely changed after the accident. Physical pain, self-image concerns, and painkiller addiction made him erratic, explosive, and uncontrollable. Personal relationships began to disintegrate, and friends watched helplessly as he sank into loneliness and self-destruction. When Clift died in 1966 at the age of 45, Hollywood called him a living tragedy. Brilliantly talented, but forever consumed by darkness.
Oliver Reed. The most vivid nightmare occurred during the filming of The Three Musketeers in 1973, when Oliver Reed showed up on set after a night of heavy drinking. A mere admonishment from an assistant director was enough to send him throwing his chair to the floor and charging at his co-workers in a fit of uncontrollable rage. Witnesses said it was not making a movie, it was trying to survive the storm that was Oliver Reed. From that day on, the entire crew walked with a reticence that could not be spoken. Oliver Reed, one of Britain's most powerful actors, possessed a wild charisma that Hollywood could not ignore. But behind that masculinity lay a violent alcoholism, fights, and an impulsivity that terrified everyone. Colleagues described him as a bomb waiting to explode, able to go from funny to aggressive in a matter of seconds. Broken relationships, ruined loves, and self-destructive behavior caused him to be dropped from many big projects. In 1999, Reed died of a heart attack in Malta after a night of excessive drinking. His life ended as he lived, violent, loud, and forever scaring those who worked with him.
Orson Welles. The biggest nightmare of the 1947 film The Lady from Shanghai wasn't the intricate shot, but the moments when Orson Welles suddenly changed the entire composition because of a small detail that annoyed him. When Welles walked onto the set, everyone stopped, not out of respect, but out of fear of his sudden anger. One day he ordered the demolition of a corner of the set that had been built for weeks. Another day, he yelled at the sound crew because of an unpleasant echo. No one knew who Welles would be when he opened the door. Orson Welles, the genius behind Citizen Kane, was an unparalleled creative mind, but also an unpredictable storm. His razor-sharp intelligence was accompanied by a huge ego, and his obsession with perfection exhausted every collaborator. Many relationships failed, marriages crumbled, and projects were left unfinished because of his erratic temperament. Hollywood both worshipped and feared him. When Welles died in 1985, he left behind a great legacy and behind-the-scenes stories that no one who experienced it will ever forget.
Peter O'Toole.
Panic spread throughout the 1962 Lawrence of Arabia film crew when Peter O'Toole suddenly became angry after a scene had to be retaken in the scorching desert heat. He threw his helmet on the sand, kicked away props, and then shouted so loudly at a young assistant that the boy left the set trembling. Crew members recalled that O'Toole's eyes at that moment no longer belonged to an actor, but to someone torn between genius and madness. From that day on, every time he appeared, the entire crew held their breath. Peter O'Toole, a man with extraordinary acting talent and a mesmerizing demeanor, was also a symbol of uncontrollable instability. He was a heavy drinker, often disappearing from the set for hours, then returning with sudden mood swings. Turbulent love affairs, bar fights, and a personal life that was all but ruined created a dark spiral that enveloped his career. When O'Toole died in 2013, Hollywood mourned a brilliant genius, but those who worked with him still vividly remember the fear that lingered behind the scenes.